I call it a breakdown, and that's probably not the most politically correct thing to say, but I was brought to my knees. Could barely live.
When was that?
I was 20 years old. I was actually living it's probably about a year or two before your generation showed up.
Yeah, in Denton, Texas.
I was living in Bruce Hall, actually, when it happened.
I lived in Bruce Hall. Shout out to Bruce Hall.
Yeah, Bruce
y'all.
Hall, yeah.
Let's go.
The best dorm at UNT.
I agree. That's a good
They still
dorm.
say that, apparently.
Good dorm.
Phil Phails for you.
Now, I didn't ever think this even. I went and got pretty good therapy the first time for it. I had a relapse about a year or two afterwards, but I suspect there was I was like, I don't want to go and be a man. Now, I never thought that, but I think that was part of it.
When you were a child, did you have any like indicators or any kind of...
I did. There's a couple that come to mind. I was not, and I think I started to say this in the conversation earlier. I didn't finish the thought. Being transgender is manifested across people in all different ways. There's no one way that people are trans. It's important for people to really take that in and think about it. Because there's this perception that a trans person, there's a cliche of, and it's valid, it exists, but that like there's children who are 3 years old and they know, a little boy who born and identified as a little boy, and they're like, no, I'm a girl. That happen. It certainly happens, but it doesn't happen with a fair amount of other trans people. I was not like that, but I used to, when I would go to like a friend's house, like a girl, and they'd have like Barbie and stuff. Like I'd love to play with it. Like I loved it.
Play with dolls.
And I remember my mom, and not that like necessarily defines gender either. Like boys can play with dolls, But in the tension of where the society was at the time, I was like, ah. And I remember my mom walking in one time and being like, what are you doing? Kind of, she didn't like hardcore shame me, but she's kind of like, huh. The very earliest memory I have was my grandmother.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Boys play with dolls.
They certainly do.
I grew up playing with dolls.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't call them Barbie. I called them G.I. Joe. I called them Star Wars. They were more masculine. But I played with dolls.
Absolutely. I mean,
playing with dolls is just like fantasizing with figurines.
With a figure, yeah. That's
and I
true.
Guess what you're saying is the world you were playing within was a more feminine world because it was Barbies, not G.I. Joes.
Right. And it was like, you don't do that. Now
you don't play in a feminine environment.
In Texas,
skewed environment.
In Texas in 1982, I say don't do.
You play your G.I. Joes, okay? You do
That's
your,
right.
you do your Thundercats.
That's right. Yeah.
You do your.
You don't play with strawberry shortcake. I remember grabbing girls like strawberry shortcake dolls and because it had like a little scent to it.
I don't identify as trans or gay or anything. I think I'm a cis hetero, white dude. But when I was growing up, I thought that Easy Bake Oven was kind of magic.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was just into sweets.
Yeah.
Probably was, but I was like, that's
it's pretty cool. You could like
cool kit.
can't remember how it worked, but you put something in it.
Put something in there and you get some brownies out. It's like, what? Let me get this magical brownie box.
And it's funny and it's stupid that like that was it was generally in our time it was a girl's toy.
It was a girl's toy.
Like that, like
everybody likes brownies.
Talk about like gender tropes, of like that.
Oh
like
yeah,
gender,
women
gender
cook.
Roles. Yeah.
Men blow up stuff with snake eyes.
Go to war. Yeah. Yeah. But I remember an early memory I had was my grandmother. I was staying with her in the summer. It was just she and I for like a week, and I would sleep with her in her bed. And she had come out wearing this gorgeous white gown, looked almost angelic. And my grandmother was quite a bit older than me. Like she was probably, when I was a little child, she was in her 70s, which to me, looked like an old person. And she comes out and she just has this beautiful white gown on. And I just remember looking at her like mesmerized. I wanted it. And
the gown.
Yeah. And she's like, what are you doing? I remember she saw me see it. she's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she was like, talk sweet to me. I was like, "Grandma, you look so beautiful." I was like, "Can I touch you?" And she's like, "Sure, sure." And she got in bed, and I just wanted to cuddle up because it's like the soft, like satin gown. I just wanted to touch it, and it felt so good. It felt so good, and I wanted to be in it, not like in, you know, some sort of like sexual way, but
Right.
it just like that, whatever that energy was. I was
You
like,
wanted to be in that dress.
yeah.
You wanted to be in that energy.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm kind of made the joke a couple times. I've told this story in public spaces before. I feel like I almost feel like the feminine's, something in my soul just jumped out, you know, in that moment. And I was like 2.5 years old. So I remember that. I had some experiences. Some trans women often have like some kind of pattern of like having dressed, you know, played in women's clothing behind the scene, like secretly. I did that with like my mom's clothes.
You did.
Yeah, yeah.
When your mom wasn't there,
When
you
my
put
mom
on her
wasn't there,
clothes.
yeah. And she knows this. I've told her, you know, this stuff, and so she didn't know at the time, but and so I knew, you know, by the time I was like, you know, 14 or 15, I knew something was. No, we didn't have so much language in our culture back then, you know, to orient it. But yeah, I knew, and I had like a tryst with a high school friend, a male, where I would be like I would be feminine presenting, and he'd be like the quote unquote, you know, man. And I remember coming out of like high school, and I used to think, oh God, that would be so awesome to like live as a woman and to like be able to live with him, and you know, and so long answer to your question, but yeah, there were more than just that, but there were many, like,
Yeah, I
kind
heard
of sons.
playing with dolls, like female oriented dolls in like this feminine world. I heard being just infatuated by beautiful feminine clothing, and then also playing dress up with your mom's clothes, and loving putting on all that feminine stuff, and then also having an experience where you were the feminine
Yeah.
oriented person in the relationship.
Yep.
And that being really powerful for you.
Yep.
Dang.
The other thing that was interesting is in my imaginary world, Chiron, I ended up deciding that there's no gender in that world.
No gender?
No gender. They recognize.
They just had smooth like the dolls
Well, no, there's biological sex and difference, but there's not clothing. There's no.
Oh, gender affirming expressions.
Yep. There's
Like
no
it's
clothes.
no pink is girl.
No type of
blue
clothing
is boy.
for a certain type of body.
Everybody has everything.
You can't. So, like, if you were to go there, other than the fact that you could see, you know, people who have beards, you know, you could see people who have boobs. Otherwise, like, there's not real clear. Like, we have all these signals in our culture.
Yeah, we do.
Right. That just doesn't exist in Chiron. So that was interesting that I like had that concept, because it was a way of.
Because women could have beards too, and dudes could have boobs in Chiron.
Actually, that's something I recently modified. I've decided that they're actually in Chiron, that they're intersex, meaning that they can have basically what we would call transsexuals. They can have men who have beards and have vaginas, and they can have genetically, they can have women who have boobs and have penises. Now, I hadn't developed that when I was young.
What you have now.
But I have now, because I think that's kind of a badass idea.
What do you think kept all this pent up? What do you think stopped you from expressing in the way that you were designed?
I think fear that I wasn't going to look pretty. Fear that that my family wasn't going to accept me, that they were going to think I was weird.
Well, heck, you couldn't make your own choices until you left those homes. Like you probably couldn't say, "Mom, I want you to start buying me skirts." And your mom said, "Okay,
I have no idea. I'm pretty sure my mom would have freaked out, but I don't know. Who knows? We also just didn't have the language in society back then that we have now. There's always been trans people, always.
Yeah, remember in MASH there was the guy who was
I didn't watch MASH.
Okay.
MASH makes me sad because the theme song always makes me feel sad.
Yeah. Okay. Well, scrap MASH,
Yeah.
but I think there's always been
There's always
people,
been there
or
have
transsexual people,
there has
or cross dressers, or
so
whatever we
that's
wanted to call it.
The difference is that our society is information is becoming more prevalent,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the explosion of information from internet, yada yada. There's much more discourse, people are more open, people are becoming more liberated, which certain parts of the population do not like. And so it's talked about more, it's named, there's more terminology to it.
Yeah.
We didn't, I didn't, had I grown up now, I'm pretty sure when some of these things were happening, I'm pretty sure at 13 and 14, the language that we have now, I could have used it in, 1991, 1992.
Mm-hmm.
But so that kind of was a variable that wasn't present.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, and then I think as I got older, it was a lot about it's going to be difficult. It's going to take so much work to change. People. I'm going to lose friends. People. I'm going to have to deal with discrimination. People are going to hate me. And some of that people, I've learned people do hate me for just how I am, and unfortunately, that's a reality in the world. But I will say this, that despite what a lot of people think, I didn't, and to this day, I haven't dealt with much overt type of hatred or
folks get beat up
or aggression
places. And they get assaulted.
It certainly does
places.
happen. It absolutely happens, and trans people are murdered.
Yeah.
Many every year, about a couple hundred. In Denton, Texas, in the first couple of years of transitioning, I never encountered any sort of, and I really thought I was. I really thought that I was going to go to a grocery store and somebody was just going to square up to me and I expected that. And that didn't happen. But, and this is a large part, I live in Washington State, large part of why is that the more things that it's a bunch of veiled, really subtle microaggressions, micro-exclusions that I got tired of dealing with. Go to the grocery store and people be like, or be in line somewhere waiting to order food and you just get like a long look, or you place your order and people go, there's just a certain pause, that they give, or, women will kind of scoot over, get away from you. Like if you're waiting in a line, like they don't want to be too close to you. I don't know what's going to happen, but, so I didn't encounter really overt things. Now, I do know trans people who have. It happens regularly. But I thought that was going to be a main issue. And, talk about how I thought things were going to go when they started to how they really went. I didn't appreciate it. I didn't do any sort of thought exercise on all the little subtle ways that people were going to exclude, be rude to me or whatnot. And it was those things that ended up exhausting me and hurting me the most. And
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah. Every single day when I lived in Denton, I was well connected in the community and supported and loved. But it's not like everybody in the entire city knew me. So any given day, I'd have 10 to 15 instances of just those little bitty, that long pause or that weird look or somebody, doing a double take or something, and got tired of it. And I was like, you know what? I need to get out of here. I need to get out. Now, I'm not sure how it'd be in Austin. I know I've spent a fair amount of time in Austin, and generally things are pretty cool. But it's in Washington. I live in a town called Bellingham, and been around Seattle and Tacoma. People don't. The thing I say is where the culture's at up there is people don't care one way or the other. It's not even about gender. I could have rubber bands, pierced all over my head, and go and talk to people, and they're not going to bat an eye, because the culture is at a place where they just the general tone. Now this isn't everywhere, but the general tone, at least in the larger cities, is like, be however you want to be. We don't care, And so that's been a relief, And in my opinion, that's how it should be.